So we're opening up the week, even though Bitcoin never sleeps. We're opening up at 40,500, which unfortunately is a little bit less than yesterday and the day before. But overall, there's a lot more fear. There's a lot more fear out there right now. There's a lot of people wondering what is going on. I mean, if you look at this, the top 100 coins within the last day are all red, except stable coins. So there's definitely fear. Retail seems to be panicking right now. There are some that are just taking, maybe, I don't know if they're taking profits or just panic selling, but there's definitely some fear right now. So why is this happening? And what's coming next? That's the most important. What's coming next? Well, we know that right now, because of volatility, because of fear, there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes. And I've been showing you guys those moving parts. We know that ETFs came out 6 days ago. And the ETFs are not just about one, or it wasn't just from one company. It was from multiple companies. In fact, over 12 companies and some of the biggest companies on the planet. So we have seen a massive amount of wealth transfer. Let's just call it that within basically the last week, you have 95,000 Bitcoins being transferred from the fearful retail investors to the very disciplined and unfearful institutional investors. That's exactly what's happening right now. You have a wealth transfer. And it's unfortunate because this is not how it's supposed to be. Retail is supposed to be taking advantage of Bitcoin, because that's why Bitcoin was created, to disrupt the financial systems and to bring power back to the people. But unfortunately, we go through these periods where the transfer goes in reverse. And that really, really sucks. We don't want to see that. But it's clear as day, these big boys, these big institutions are gobbling up all the Bitcoin out there right now from the retail investors. They're panic selling. You see, day 6, which already ended, that was last week, last Friday, Fidelity even outperformed BlackRock. Fidelity, let's not forget, is not a small fish in a pond. They're like a top 5 asset manager in the world too. They stocked up 222 million worth of Bitcoin. BlackRock accumulated 200 million worth of Bitcoin. And then Invesco, ARK, Bitwise all accumulated about 60 million worth of Bitcoin and so forth. The only fund manager that didn't accumulate is Grayscale, who continues to sell by leaps and bounds. At one point, they're going to stop, but right now, there are a lot of selling. But regardless, the big boys are eating up as much as they can. And here's the kicker. While the market is showing weakness, you would figure, well, the overall market is weak and everyone is selling off and everyone has no interest. Well, why are these fund managers adding billions of Bitcoin into their funds? In fact, just after 1 week now, BlackRock, which is the iShares, controls 1.4 billion worth of Bitcoin. Fidelity controls about 1.3 billion in Bitcoin. And if you add everyone else up, that's another billion plus. That's why we got 4 billion worth of Bitcoin being transferred to big boys. You can make the argument, and I said this last week, like who's actually behind? Who's behind the weakness? Who's causing the market to drop? Well, if you don't know, right, and you really can't tell and pinpoint who is causing it, well, just look at who benefits the most. And it's these guys right here. And it's happening right in front of our eyes. So, unfortunately, that's what's happening. These big boys are taking up all the Bitcoin out there. And don't let that happen. Because we know this is temporary. We know that Bitcoin is in a bull run, is going to have the halving event and many catalysts that's coming up just within a matter of months. We're not even talking about years now anymore. Back in 2022, I would have to say, well, keep in mind the halving event is in 2024, in 2 years. I don't have to say that. I could say the halving event is coming in basically 3 months. And there's many other things that's coming within the next few months, right? This is the absolute worst time to be fearful of the market and being driven out of the market by these manipulators or Wall Street or these fund managers. No, this is the absolute worst time to be leaving, especially when you realize that Bitcoin is still above 40,000. Okay, so I mean, you don't have to go back very long on the charts to realize that Bitcoin was way below 40 just a month ago, 2 months ago. We were still hovering in the 30s and in the 20s. So we have come up quite far within a very short amount of time. So again, this is really not the time to be panicking. And I've mentioned about the halving event. That's coming up in 3 months, right? It's actually less than 3 months. It's actually more like 2 months and 3 weeks. But leading up to it, okay, we have a lot of similarities between what's happening right now and previous times. Sometimes you just have to zoom out. When in doubt, zoom out. You'll realize that we have gone through periods like this before. We have seen volatility before. We have seen Bitcoin dip before. And what normally happens is afterwards, we head higher, we forget about it. I mean, that's honestly the truth. No one's going to remember every single dip that we've ever had. This is what it's looking like, going all the way back to like a year ago. Exactly, we have seen exactly the same thing. We have seen dips, we have seen trend lines, we have seen supports, we have seen resistances, and then what happens? Boom, we break higher. That was showing when Bitcoin was around 16,000. We went sideways for a while, around 16, 17,000. It was scary, right? But no one talks about that anymore. No one seems to remember that. What about the period when Bitcoin was around 25,000? We couldn't break it. We kept going upwards to 30,000, and then we fell back down to 25,000 several times. And that was for how many months? That was almost the entire 2023 year. We didn't start moving until October. But a lot of people gave up because every time we went up to 30,000, we fell right back down to 25,000. Do you guys remember that? I don't. I forgot about those times. I just remember what started happening in October. That's usually how it is. You remember the good, you forget the bad, but we were stuck at that 25,000 range for basically an entire year, okay? And we're past it. So this is definitely not time to be fearful or getting driven out of the market. This is a time to shine. This is a time to shine. Here's another example, looking at what happened in 2021 right before the parabolic rise. We had this bull flag that we broke out of, okay, in 2021. And also, if you go back to 2017, but it's too small to see. But we had this little bull flag we broke out of. Then we had a slight dip. And then afterwards, what happened? We just went upwards. And this is according to Fibonacci level. So both times before, we hit the 6.618 Fibonacci level after that bull flag. Okay, so in 2017, we went up from basically the bottom of 160 to 20,000. In 2021, we went from a bottom of 3,800 to 68,000. And this time around, our bottom was 16,000. Looking at the top of the Fibonacci level, this is saying that we should be going to at least $120,000. And that is looking at like within this year. That's not even talking about 2025. So again, we have seen periods like this before. We have seen mini drops. No one remembers afterwards. So just make sure you guys do not get feared out of the market. Do not lose your conviction and faith in Bitcoin. This is the absolute worst time to be getting out. There's so many good things coming up. And I mentioned catalysts. Of course, the halving event is probably the biggest catalyst there is when it comes to Bitcoin. It happens every 4 years and inflation gets cut in half. There's no bigger catalyst than a halving event.